All right. Day number, what, 4? 5? Five? Yeah, it's 5. It's Thursday, at least. We do know that. And this part of Holy Week, I think, for me growing up, the Last Supper, we all think about that famous painting. You know, we probably think about, communion. This is my bread. This is my body and my blood. And but the Last Supper is so significant. We were just talking about Judas and how he still had a seat at the table. Well, Judas had already made the plans, and he's sitting there at the table one last time with the crew, the original crew. I think there's so many different pieces of significance that we can take away from the Last Supper. So let's just kind of, what's the first thing that you think of when you think of the significance of the Last Supper to your everyday Christian walk?
Man, I don't know about you guys, but supper at our house is like the only time our whole family is all in the house. And so we try to make it a big point to sit at the table together and have a meal together, and usually like 2 or 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. That's our goal, okay? 2 or 3 meals at the table a week. And what Jesus is showing here is the importance of community, how much we need each other. Remember, his last prayer in John 17 is for our unity. Mm-hmm. So the very last thing Jesus prays that we have recorded in Scripture is that we would be for each other and before God. And I think it's just so important to realize that, Jesus, yes, he did know that Judas was betraying him, but he still had a seat at the table. He still washed Judas's feet this day. Like on this Thursday, he washes the disciples. He comforts them because he knows, like, man, I'm about to leave these guys. So if you've ever taught somebody something and this is our last lesson, this is where Jesus is at right here. Right. This is our last lesson together. Right. And in the back of his head, he knows what's about to transpire, but nobody else does. And so I just think it's an amazing portrayal of community. And then, of course, he says, do this in remembrance of me. So he gives this mandate to the future church, like, hey, whenever you guys break bread, communion, what is it? You can break that word into common union. Like, what is it that we have together in common that unifies us? And at the table, I just love so many great analogies and books that have been written about the table. One of my favorites is this guy, Leonard Sweet. He wrote a book, From Tablet to Table. And I would encourage everybody just to pick up that book because it talks about the importance of breaking bread and sharing a meal together. But I think Jesus is establishing we're going to need each other after this. Please, when the sheep scatter, y'all don't scatter.
Yeah. It's also kind of a meal of fulfillment. So it goes back to that original meal is representative. It goes back to the Passover and the celebration of what God did through the nation of Israel. Right. The shed, it's prophetic. There's a lamb that's about to be shed, all that stuff. We're remembering that. But it's also 4 meals, which even goes back to what we do as a church today. So we, as a church, have 4 missions. We're called to help people know God, to find family, to discover their purpose, to make a difference. And actually, the cups that were shared that night represent those 4 things. They represent redemption and hope and connection and family. And so it's crazy to think that even back then, Jesus was not just bringing back the story of the Old Testament. He was prophesying right then the mission of the church.
That's so good. Yeah, and I think it's funny because every church does communion a little bit different, but at the end of the day, you've got 2 elements, and those 2 elements are so significant, right? You've got Jesus' body, which in just a few hours is going to be broken for them, and then, of course, his blood, which will be spilled out, and it is because of that, that you and I, we get to experience God's grace. We get to walk into that. I love the conversation about family, because the thing is, it's because of that blood shed that we get to all be adopted into his family. And of course, they're sitting at a table doing what families do, eating a meal, and that's powerful.
Yeah, I think what sticks out to me is just the washing of the feet. A couple weeks ago, as part of our kids' sermon, we actually had the kids up there. We picked about 6 or 7 kids and just kind of washed their feet for real, as a demonstration of what Jesus did at the Last Supper. And we picked a kid and had him play the part of Judas and just kind of explained what Judas was going to do and that Jesus knew, and then showed Jesus getting down and like getting down low as humanly possible and washing his feet anyway and just loving him and serving him anyway. And I think that's hard to grasp probably now culturally of like the significance of that and truly how low that was and how much that was truly serving. And I think Jesus' response after that is like, this is the example that you're to follow. This is how you're to treat each other. And I think that's, ever since we taught that lesson, I can't stop thinking about that part of the Last Supper.
Wow.